Welcome everyone to the meeting of the HR Board Classification Subcommittee. We are here with the Director of Planning, Martha Taylor, who's joining us through with a Zoom link this morning for the purposes of reviewing and potentially reclassifying the Inspectional Services Administrative Assistant position. I believe that's the current and accurate title. Is that correct, Martha?
Yes.
Okay. And present today, we do have a quorum present today. Let me ask everyone to say their name. Mark Leckman, Chair.
Anthony Antico.
Diane Doyle.
John Ferrara.
And again, joining us today through Zoom is Martha Taylor. So thank you. Martha, just a couple of general thoughts. Diane mentioned that you had joined us previously for a classification subcommittee meeting in the past. Is that correct? I haven't recalled that.
I know that we went through classification for Emily. I can't remember if it was the actually a meeting or not, or if it was.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it was.
So what we'll do is, did you have a chance, Diane, to give send the
Yes.
factors to Martha? You got the individual factors in front of you, there, Martha, just to save some time.
I do, and I've
We'll go
gone.
through each one of them, and it's a pretty straightforward process. And then typically at the end, what we like to do, and Diane is certainly the key ingredient here, is we then look at the rating that we've given the position, and then we just do a sanity check and make sure that it looks and feels and sounds right as it relates to other positions within the town hierarchy, if you will, that are rated in the same classification range, just to make sure that everybody's comfortable with that, and if necessary, take a second look through it, but typically that's not required.
So Martha, I just, maybe you and I just wanted to give a quick update on why this is coming before the board at this point. The Inspectional Services Department has had some transition and change, and this position is now vacant. And so what we've recognized is that this position has now incorporated other responsibilities, which incorporates also the ZBA, the Zoning Board of Appeals. So Martha and I sat down with some input from the prior ZBA administrative person and sort of revised this job description to update it to where it is now in the position that we'll be looking to fill. So there has been enough of a change in the position that we felt that it should be rated. Martha, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you've covered it very well.
Great, and Martha, just to be clear, this position reports directly to you.
Well,
Do you want me to take that one?
yeah, why don't you take that one?
Okay, so so we went through many different iterations of the org chart on this one, but the person technically reports directly to Martha, although they work on a day-to-day basis for the conservation agent and also supports the building inspector. So it's sort of reports directly to Martha, but really supports two functions that Martha oversees.
That was one of the questions I had, because I noticed in a couple of places here, Martha, as you rejig the job description, it talked about as directed by the conservation agent a couple of three times. And I assume that means that there's some sort of a matrix or if a solid line to you and a dotted line to someone else on an as needed basis. Is that?
I mean, I think, I think basically, on a day-to-day basis for conservation functions and for building inspectional services functions, this person will be working directly for the conservation agent and the building commissioner. And especially for conservation things, I mean, there will be, she will really be, he or she will be reporting to the agent for the day-to-day and all the meeting coordinating applications and stuff like that. I'm kind of somewhere in a sort of umbrella oversight position, but I think some of the more direct responsibilities may actually have to do with the zoning board. As you know, Susan Noyes left, and she had been operating with the ZBA completely independently of planning or any of the other departments. And So it seemed to make sense to bring those functions into this position. But it does make the sort of the lines of reporting a little bit messy.
Right, but broad picture, the person would get his or her guidance from you generally.
I mean, I would say for the ZBA stuff, for sure. For conservation, the guidance will be coming from the conservation agent.
Okay, but there's certainly no need to have a conservation agent here
No.
to really go through this process. Technically, the org chart, the position will roll up under you, so you feel comfortable being able to help us work through the classification.
I think so.
Okay. Very good. We open it up. Diane, Tony, John, any other questions for Martha or observations to make before we get cracking here?
Nope.
No, not yet.
Okay, first classification is complexity, judgment, decision-making. It deals with the complexity of the tasks performed, what degree of judgment is necessary to make decisions and problem solve on an as-needed basis. And the ranking levels increase with a variety of activities and the difficulty of the problems faced. The range anywhere from a 1, which is very highly repetitive work, a few simple tasks performed on a repetitive basis. 2 is fairly routine. 3 is somewhat complex, and you can see each of these subcategories. Martha has 2 or 3 bullet items just to give the manager some help in understanding, how a 2 might evolve into a 3, and a 3 might become a 4, depending. And the other thing we always like to say at the beginning here is that, sometimes it's unclear whether a position is a factor is a 1 or a 2 or a 5 or a 6 or anything in between. We do have the opportunity to split it in half, to call it a 2.5 or a 4.5 if needed. We try to avoid that just to keep it clean, but if we have to, we have to, that's fine. And the other thing we also mentioned is that, if, for example, you thought it might be a 3, it doesn't have to hit every single one of the bullet items connected to 3. We just make an assumption that the majority of the work might fit within the 3 category. Some of it might be an outlier in a 2 or 4, but that's where we're comfortable leaving it in a 3. Okay?
Yep.
Sort of a general guideline. So 3 is somewhat complex, requires some analysis and planning. Decisions involve identifying alternatives to improve procedures. A 4 is complex work, may require modification of existing procedures. 5, as you can see, highly diversified and complex. Recommends changes to policy, involves planning, analysis, and coordination of a major interrelated activities. And a 6, which is the highest ranking, is that this person is responsible for formulating policies. Your thoughts on that?
I went through these before we met, and my feeling is that it's somewhere between a 3 and a 4, and I'm sort of trying to think, particular about conservation and about ZBA. So I don't know if that's helpful.
So somewhere between a 3 and a 4?
Yeah.
Okay. Tony, John, your thoughts? Diane?
Here.
The other thing we also talked about, Martha, is that, we try to avoid outliers. And by that we mean, if in the course of a year, somebody might be responsible for 1 or 2 bullet items on this list, but it's not part of the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month functionality of the job, we take that out of the equation. If, however, something is done on a regular basis, twice a month, this person's responsible for X, Y, or Z, then it's not an outlier, and we would factor that into the rating.
Yeah.
So,
I see it as a 3+. I don't know that it rises to a 4. Just because a lot of 4, it requires changes to existing procedures. Exceptions require resolved by changes to administrative and technical procedures, this person still would be reporting to someone else.
Right.
And in the review of the job description that Martha and I went to, we kept saying under the direction of
Right.
conservation agent, under the direction of. So I would see it definitely as a 3. I don't know that it's a 4. We could do a 3.5. I mean, this is a very, when we went through this, it is a very complex and responsible position. But it still operates as a support. So I would say it probably, my overall would be a 3.5.
Martha, is it safe to assume that this is one of the positions at Town Hall that probably has the broadest reach in terms of the number of different, whether it's governmental agencies or committees, maybe ad hoc special project work involved as they're pulling together things from different pieces of the town structure?
Actually, I don't see it that way. I see it really very focused on sort of the 3 areas of responsibility, the ZBA, the Concom, and inspectional services, the building inspector. I don't see this person, and this person will have a lot of contact with the public, but I don't see too much kind of outreach to other boards and committees and things like that.
That's as low as,
Okay, I may have misread that. Thank you.
that's as low as it goes.
John, Tony?
Yeah, I, looking at the job description and how often certain phrases are used, to me, I was looking at routine ranking. Because it talks about being essentially a clerical office, administrative knowledge of the office machinery, and working with certain other staff members, but it's mostly on informational level to make sure X, Y, and Z have been appropriately informed, or a report sent to, or whatever. And if anything, I might, after reading the description, probably go to like a 2.5. But it's to me, it's a routine, it's a clerical, administrative position. I mean, unless I'm missing something here. Unless there's more to it than the job description allows.
Martha, do you want to take that, or, I mean?
Well, and my feeling is it's a little bit more than that. I mean, it's going to have to be somebody who, who uses very, very good judgment, has quite a bit of knowledge about their areas of responsibility. So it's more than just clerical, more than sort of knowledge of office functions and procedures and things like that. So
I think I can think of a couple of examples. So it's not someone that's coming and just receiving an application for a building permit or ZBA. Yes, they have to process that. There's a very involved process that has to be gone through. That would be a supportive role, but also people coming in that are contractors or builders who are asking questions about regulations regarding fences or regulations regarding pools, or this person needs to be the forefront as a resource as well. They're not just processing paperwork. They're really sort of the first line of defense when it comes to accepting applications and getting people the information that they need. I mean, I guess that's how I would describe it as I see it. So it's not just clerical. It's definitely someone who has to have a working knowledge of the various departments that they're servicing as a point person for the customer coming in as a customer facing role. So I guess, I that's how I see it. I don't know if you want to add anything, Martha.
no, I think that's correct. It's I just think it's more complex than a routine job.
If we look at the bullet items under 3, Martha, I guess for me the key would be, do you see this individual from time to time having to identify alternatives to current procedures, practices, and techniques? And if so, analyze how, if or when those changes to standard procedures could and should be made. Because if that's part of this role, then it feels to me like it's a it can be a comfortable 3. If not, then I think Tony's point is a good one.
Again, it's hard to say because this person will be doing something that somebody else had been doing very independently for a long time. I know that, and I don't know that this answers your question necessarily, but I know that the current vice chair of the ZBA is really looking to work with this person to sort of develop a better application process so that the information that gets to the ZBA is complete. So it's not going to be taking what's there and just kind of continuing that, but being a little bit more proactive in developing sort of better procedures.
Okay. That's typically the line of demarcation where it goes from routine to somewhat complex. So, John, other thoughts, questions?
I think the essential issue regarding 3 is that she's dealing with the public, and she's the first line with the public, and the word assist is complicated. And so I think she's clearly in the 3 range.
I would say 3.
Yeah.
To Tony's point, yeah.
Back and forth, they're doing the 3. So let's take a vote on it. Diane Doyle,
I guess I would say a 3.
Tony Antico,
I go 3.
John Farrar,
3.
and Mark Leckman 3. Thank you all. Next factor is maybe out of
Education.
is it education next? Okay.
Yeah.
Pretty
And-
straightforward here. We've got everything from a 1, which is junior high school, up to grade 11. 2 is high school graduate. 3 is some formal training beyond the high school diploma, but nothing else required in terms of degree. A 4 is completion of a 2-year post-secondary, it's basically an associate's level degree, bachelor's, all the way up to 6 advanced studies. You've got associate's degree in a related field preferred. So let's talk about that. Is it a preference? Is it a strong preference? Certainly doesn't sound like a prerequisite to have an associate's degree. How would you classify it?
And this probably won't help you much either. I mean, I think a lot of it really depends on the person, because it will definitely have to be somebody who writes well, who has a good, good understanding of the English language. Is this person will be drafting decisions for the Zoning Board of Appeals. I don't know whether there will be any assistance to the Concom and drafting orders of conditions and things like that. But I think, somebody with, kind of a base level of not, I mean, it could be a high school graduate who's got a lot of energy and a lot of interest and curiosity, who writes really well, could be perfect for the job. But, my feeling is that somebody's got a little bit more sort of general education would be better. Ideally, somebody like a paralegal or someone like that would be great in the job, but.
Right. I mean, based on the job, the way you've worded it in the job description, it's not a direct hit, but it feels like a 3 to me. You're not talking about formal training beyond high school, but on the same token, you're not suggesting that an associate's degree is a requirement either. But that, something post-high school graduate would be a strong preference.
I would say.
I would put it into a 3 in my mind. Other thoughts? John, Tony?
I'm going to agree that it's a 3.
I agree as well.
Let's vote on that. John Farrar,
3.
Diane Doyle,
3.
Tony Antico,
3.
Mark Leckman, 3. Next job factor is experience, the time required to develop the necessary skills and expertise. Experience is defined as the length of time required to acquire skills, fulfill duties and responsibilities. Years of experience are often used in the recruitment process. And then we consider the complexity of the issues faced and the amount of judgment exercised. Generally, the more judgment exercised, the more experience is required. And the rankings go all the way from a 1, which is 1 to 6 months of experience, up to a 6, which is more than 10 years. And the job description, Martha, you talked about 1 year of work experience. Again, you use the term preferred. Are you comfortable with preferred? Should we change that to strongly preferred?
And I would say strongly preferred, and municipal experience also.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
She said municipal experience preferred as well, which is
I
what
saw
we've
that.
added in
Yeah.
here. So she wants to change it to strongly preferred.
Strongly preferred, okay?
Okay,
So that would put it into I guess well, let me open it up. People feel it's a,
Well, 12 months equals a year, but that's in rank number 2, but in rank number 3, you begin at 1 year, 1 to 3
1 to
years.
3
So that
years,
would
yeah.
make it, I mean, is it reasonable to presume that it should go as a 3?
yeah, I would say so.
yeah.
I agree.
John?
Yeah, 3.
Let's vote on that. Diane Doyle,
3,
Tony Antico,
3.
John Ferrara,
3.
Mark Lechman, 3. Next factor is independent action. Refers to the initiative required to perform the duties and responsibilities effectively. It includes the creativity and original thought required by the job, and the amount of direction and control received from the supervisor or by standard practices and precedents. We've already talked about the fact that this is a bit of a hybrid or a matrix role in which technically in the org chart, the position will report to Martha, but on a very regular basis, this person will be working under the guidance, if you will, of I think you said the conservation agent. Martha, is that correct?
Yes, yes. And to a lesser degree, the building inspector.
Martha, how frequently would you think this person would be, independent in his or her actions or decision making?
I would say, and certainly in dealing with the public, that person is probably going to have to be making split second decisions sometimes when situations come up, and will not necessarily have the guidance of either me or the conservation agent or the building commissioner to to be there. Obviously, if it's something very complex, hopefully the person will have judgment to say, I will need to check on that and get back to you. But I think it's not a situation where anybody's going to be able to, be looking over his or her shoulder all the time and, supervising the work.
Okay, thank you. So we look at the rankings here. It goes from a 1, which is works under close supervision on a regular basis. A 2 is works under less frequent supervision, but generally within standard practice and established procedures. Occasionally, this person would make decisions on the setup of his or her work, but would refer any and all significant problems, issues, concerns onto the supervisor. A 3 is works under occasional supervision, proceeds on his or her own when a majority of the duties are defined by general instructions and established protocols, precedents, but does use initiative and or ingenuity to identify potential problems and conducts research to determine a viable solution. Generally or usually refers problems onto the supervisor. A 4 works within general guidance and direction, but generally carries out plans on their own, applies policies and standards widely accepted. Assignments may involve creative work and or innovation. Any need to go beyond that, Martha, in your eyes?
No.
Okay. How do you feel about that factor?
To me, I would say it seems to fall under a 3. Where the duties are laid out, they're very clear, the procedures are set. But again, there will be times when the person will have to use initiative or judgment.
Right. But if there's anything truly extraordinary or out of the norm, he or she would refer it on to the supervisor.
Absolutely.
I see it.
Tony, thoughts?
I think it's a solid 3.
Yeah.
John,
as well, the initiative aspect.
any questions, thoughts? Let's take a vote. Tony Antico,
3.
John Farrar,
3.
Diane Doyle,
3.
Mark Lightman, 3. Thank you. Next factor, consequence of errors. This factor assesses the likelihood and the probable effect of any errors on the job, and it considers the following. Who's affected? Is it the unit within the department? Is it an entire department? Is it the town? Is it the general public? The extent of losses to the town which could result from inappropriate decisions or judgments. Is it a normal or an extreme error? What are the possible and or serious consequences? How easy is the error to correct? So those are some of the things we think about in terms of the consequence of the errors. One is errors are readily detected, cost and impact are minimal, may cause some loss of credibility to the individual, but generally doesn't extend beyond that. 2, errors are probably detected by others within the work area. Errors may result in brief delays in services or completion of tasks. They may be somewhat noticeable as materials are replaced or equipment may be out of service. A slight loss of credibility to the unit or the department. 3, errors affect the work of others but are generally not damaging to the town. Things can be replaced or repaired or changed quickly. Errors are detected and corrected before they become serious. It could cause a significant loss of time, delays, record keeping, data reports, so forth. Errors may have an adverse impact on the public and or public relations. 4 is errors cause substantial identifiable losses to the town beyond damage and waste as a result of inadequate planning, may cause substantial delays in services or programs, could be identifiable deterioration in public and employee relations, and errors may result in physical injury. I think we need to get beyond that. Unless you would disagree with that, Martha?
No, no, I mean, this is a little bit of a tricky one because there are, some serious consequences if errors are made in this department. If things aren't noticed, well, if incorrect information is given out to an applicant or something, that could be quite an issue, and the town ultimately could have some liability if there are mistakes made.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you maybe give us an example or two of something that, knock wood, wouldn't happen, but what might be again, we're trying to stay away from outliers here.
Right.
So what might happen on a somewhat normal basis that would fit into this category of judgments made and errors needed to be corrected? Or it might cause some issue.
Right. And I'm thinking of a couple that happened recently, actually, but part of it goes back to supervision as well. But for example, there's a very strict timeline getting public hearings noticed. And if there's a mistake in the notification that's put together and a mistake in publication, that can be costly in terms of either having to get it republished, like, several $100s, or there can be an issue where a public hearing is actually delayed. So, that becomes then an issue for the applicant and the timing of their project.
And by extension, that might cause some argument in town hall or in general with the public.
Right.
Okay.
Costly, timely, errors in other areas. I mean, there could be some liability, like you mentioned, legal liability in terms of the wrong information being given out, or even the notice itself, if it wasn't properly noticed, there could be a liability issue.
Right. And hopefully with somebody who is, willing to accept the supervision and guidance, those things wouldn't happen. But, but there is that possibility. you know, things are very, very time sensitive. And the processes and procedures need to be followed very, very sort of specifically.
The thing I'm getting a little bit hung up on here is, you know, as an example, in the 4 rating, the word substantial is used in multiple bullet points. So I'm just wondering, you know, how we can identify, you know, what is considered a substantial loss to the town? What is considered a substantial delay in services or programs? You know, if we're talking about a meeting that might need to be rescheduled, you know, because it wasn't posted properly or timely, you know, that maybe is a 3 or 4 day process. Is that a substantial delay in services or programs? It doesn't feel that way to me. So I'm gonna just I do see where it's critically important that this individual is timely and accurate with all of the information that is forthcoming for meetings and other things. So it seems to me it's a strong 3, but I'm sure if it rises beyond that. Tony?
Yeah, I was looking at that word generally, and factor number 3, it says, the errors affect the work of others, but are generally not damaging to the town. Well, that means that sometimes they are.
Mhm.
So I personally would not go beyond this
Yeah.
because of that.
I would agree.
John, any thoughts?
So I 3 is a good landing spot.
Thoughts? Okay, let's vote on that. John Farrar,
3.
Diane Doyle,
3.
Tony Antico,
3.
Mark Blackman, 3. Thank you. Next factor is contacts. This refers to the importance to the organization of the working relationships required of the position. The contacts can be internal or external to the organization. They may take a variety of forms: face-to-face, on the phone, public appearances, and the media. This factor also assesses who the contacts are, what the purpose of the contacts are, and the importance to the town. Contacts could include, but are not limited to, residents, elected officials, members of town boards, appointees, co-workers, etc. Interaction may cover a variety of purposes and complexity, and is expected at all levels. 1 is routine, just within the immediate area. Basic information is given and received. 2 is routine with occasional discussions outside the immediate area, frequently involving routine information to more than one source. They may have occasional contact with the public, town officials, or board members. 3 is frequent and important beyond immediate associates. Requires appropriate tact to discuss problems and act as a resource person, making recommendations or to clarify policies. This person would have limited responsibility for securing cooperation, regular contact with the public, town officials, board members, and some responsibility to persuade, convince, or secure cooperation. 4 is frequent and important for the purposes of clarifying town procedures and resolving issues. Requires the use of interpersonal skill to clarify and to communicate effectively. Requires in-depth professional knowledge of the subject being discussed. 5 is frequent and important of deep personal concerns to folks. We always circle that because that's in the eyes of the beholder, of course. And 6 is contacts of vital to viability of town. So Martha, your thoughts?
To me, I would say this falls probably as a 3. This person is going to have a tremendous amount of contact with the public, with, you know, builders, contractors, residents, will be basically the gateway of information for zoning, conservation, and building.
In-depth professional knowledge of the subject being discussed.
Yeah. That's where I stopped short of a 4.
How do you feel about that? This is the second bullet item on the 4.
You know, I think the in-depth knowledge that's where it gets tricky. I think if there are things that really require in-depth knowledge, they need to be referred to the conservation agent, or for zoning to me or one of the ZBA members. So the person is going to need to be able to exercise the judgment to determine, sort of what's in their ballpark and what's not in their ballpark.
Right. How about that first bullet item on the form, Martha? Requires the use of interpersonal skills to clarify the context issues and to communicate information clearly.
Well, that definitely is part of it.
It is, yeah. I'm wondering if this is one of these factors that we might consider splitting the two.
3.5.
Considering it
3.5.
3.5, yeah. I'm not quite sure it rises to 4, but when you talk about the frequency and the importance of this person's using his or her skills interpersonally to be able to deal with the public and contractors on a daily basis or a regular basis, at least, it would seem to be part and parcel of the duty. So I'm wondering if 3.5 is appropriate here. Other thoughts?
I was thinking the same thing.
Let's vote on it. Diane Doyle,
I would go 3.5.
3.5. Tony?
Agreed.
John?
3.5.
And Mark Lackman, 3.5. Supervision. This is a fact that we cover two different ways, Martha. One is, what is the character of the supervision? What are the supervisory responsibilities, if any? And the other is just a straight scope. What's the head count? I think this is pretty clean in both categories. There is no supervisory responsibility in this role, is there?
I don't see any.
Yeah. And this person is not responsible for sort of, corralling volunteers, ad hoc projects. Sometimes we take that into consideration. Somebody may only have a staff of 2. As an example, when we were talking about one of the COA roles a month or so ago, the person might only have a staff of 1 or 2, but on a regular basis, they're coordinating and overseeing the activities of dozens and dozens of volunteers. That's not the case here. It's a
No.
straightforward individual contributor role.
That's how I would see it.
Okay. So it will be a 0 in terms of scope and a 0 in terms of supervision, correct?
Yep.
That's okay. John Farrar,
I agree, 0.
Diane Doyle,
0.
Tony,
0.
Mark Lackman, 0. Okay. Physical demands. The degree, the frequency, the severity, the intensity, and the continuity of physical activity and intense visual concentration. And what we refer to there is, physical is pretty straightforward. A lot of bending, a lot of lifting, a lot of carrying, a lot of pushing. But we also factor in, is this person in front of a screen 6 to 8 hours a day? And we factor in the eye strain, it can physically deplete you, even though you're not, in a demanding role physically. It can wear you down, being in front of that screen all day. So help us with this one, Martha.
I would say that's pretty much 100% of the time is, sitting at his or her desk in front of a computer screen, except when he or she is helping residents or other members of the public.
Sorry.
Basically sitting, working at a computer is pretty much predominantly the course of work, with the exception of getting up to the customer or making plans, copies of plans on the plan copier, stamping in large plans.
So on the physical demand side, there's not much to speak of, but in terms of the visual concentration, there's a lot of time on the screen. Would you say that's 20%, how much of this individual's time is spent in front of the screen versus, dealing with the public? Is the person staring at that screen 20% of his or her time? 30%, 50%?
I'd say at least 60%.
I'd say 50 to 75% of the
50
time.
to 75% of that? In front of the screen, is that what it's?
Yeah, I would say.
I mean, also there are the large folders that they're, stacking and filing, in terms of the parcel. I mean, I've noticed that she's been coordinating large Pendaflex folders, and I mean, there is some physical exertion, although it's not heavy lifting, but
Right. There actually might be some heavy lifting too, going into storage and, pulling out some of the boxes and researching past applications and things like that. So there is that component as well.
yeah.
Okay.
I would see it as at least a 2, possibly a 3.
Well, 3 is, frequent moving about, some physical effort. Involves activities that can cause moderate physical exertion or fatigue. Visual concentration is greater than 50% of the time, which you said is the case here. And requires extended periods of time sitting and or standing.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
That would certainly post 3.
All right, let's vote on that. Tony Antico,
3.
John Farrar,
3.
Diane Doyle,
3.
Mark Blackman, 3. And I think our last factor is working conditions. How agreeable or disagreeable are the aspects of the job in terms of the environment? What is the degree of severity of the workplace hazard, if any? Are there health hazards involved? Martha, is this exclusively an office role, or is this a role that requires the individual to ever be out on a job site, in the outside environment, doing some research, doing some, walking, looking at a home, a fence line, anything like that?
I think it really is office-based. If somebody's going to be out in the field, it's going to be the conservation agent, or it's going to be me. So I don't see any, I really don't see potential for outside hazards.
Okay, so this person is generally not exposed to anything that's bothersome, odors, dirt, illnesses, anything that could cause minor injuries, nothing like that.
No, I don't think so.
Fight in the cafeteria, maybe.
Except for the mold on some of the conservation and building files from when they were stored over at the landfill. But otherwise, it's just general office.
Feels like a 1.
1 to me.
1.
1.
Let's vote on that. Diane Doyle?
1.
Tony Antico?
1.
John Ferrara? 1. Mark Blackman, 1. Thank you. And Martha, this just brings us to our close. And what we do is we'd like to just pause for a second here and think about whether this rating should all be influenced by, and when we say influence, we're talking about, is it a 13.1? Is it a 13.2? Is it a 13.3? And the 1, the 2, and the 3 usually refer to things like, is there an extraordinary volume of work here above and beyond the norm? Is the degree of confidentiality involved something, again, above and beyond the norm, extraordinary? The duties assumed, the accuracy required, is it, standard office practice stuff? Or is it truly something in this role that makes it special and apart, that would give it further consideration? And the other thing we look at is, what does the marketplace look like here? Is this an individual that's gonna, we're gonna have to turn over 1,000 rocks to find? Or would you expect that there would be, a reasonably healthy candidate pool for a role like this? Not necessarily for this job today, but just in general. What is, does it require 2 advanced degrees? Does it require specific experience within a particular field? Those kinds of things. Is there something about the qualifications of the role here that make it something that we should take into consideration or not?
I don't know what you think, Diane, but I mean, it seems to me that it's, there's nothing really extraordinary about it.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a 3 where we're struggling to find a candidate pool. I don't think it's a 1 where there's, a plethora of, tons of people that would have what we're looking for, because it is sort of a unique position that requires some level of experience and skill set. So I would see it as a point two in the administrative role. I mean, obviously you could find someone that was a very strong administrator or an assistant that could grow into the knowledge piece of it. But I would clearly see it as a point two. I don't know if that makes more sense to you, Martha.
That does.
Thoughts, John?
We've got to ask the question, she's answering to 3 chiefs. Do you see any extraordinary issue there where he or she is dealing with 3 bosses in that juggling match?
I don't think it requires a specific extra skill set. I think it's just going to have to be very, Martha and I have talked about this, it will have to be communicated and coordinated, and they are physically located very close to one another. And I think Martha's now keyed into sort of how it works in a hybrid scenario where this person's reporting really more to the building commissioner and the conservation agent, but under the auspice of planning in general. So I think it actually may work better having the ZBA folded into this area so it can sort of all work in congruity with one another.
Right,
So-
which they should.
Yeah.
And it will certainly be important for this person to be a very good multitasker and, be able to sort of change gears at any given time, especially with sort of the 3 different responsibilities. But
Right. Although we did factor a lot of that into the
Right,
factors
right.
that we've already come through. So the question is, from a recruitment standpoint, is there enough here to suggest that it's not the norm, which would be a 1? Is there enough meat on these bones to suggest that, given the complexity of the role, given the the multiple agencies involved, if you will, the matrix reporting structure, is that enough? In combination with the candidate pool that we're expecting here, is it enough to bump it to a 2? And Diane, you were suggesting it's not.
I think it is.
Other thoughts, Tony?
Well, I would defer to Diane on that. She knows more about the positions and how the multiple boards work together, and ZBA and Concom, inspectional. Is there do they work together well? As a practical matter, or do you need someone in this role who ends up being more of a unifier? Sub silencio, of course, they don't say anything to anybody, but I've got to keep her happy or him happy. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, I think we spoke to it earlier when we talked about how it's not just a clerical position. I mean, they're scheduling ZBA hearings. They're making sure that the individual ZBA members are getting the correct packages to be able to review. They're notifying, they're putting publications in the newspaper for publication. There's a significant amount of extra skill set. And I think, this, especially as we went through the job description, I think we realized that we'd like to see this as a more really strong role for those functions.
Right.
So I visually see this position on a daily basis. So I see the amount of multitasking and work and coordination. And so I see it more than just a clerical position. And I think that speaks to the preference on the experience and the increase in the education and some of the role itself. So I see it as a point 2.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think that what we're talking about here is as it relates to this extra element that we consider at the end, Martha, is, could the complexity of this role, or should the complexity of this role be a factor in looking at the candidate pool? You're not just hiring for a clerical role. You're hiring somebody who you're assuming, your vision for this person is that he or she will need to be more than the standard office clerical worker, if you will. And if that's the case, then I think we can justify moving it to a 2.
So
Does that take us back to, I bracketed specifically education Because my sense of somebody that has, again, all of those tethers to manage an associate's degree indicates two levels to me. A, academic capability of learning new things, and B, a commitment to overall education, continuing education, which is what we're all into in all of our respective practices. And I wonder if we shouldn't revisit education at 3.5 or 4.
I'd certainly open it up to do that. I don't think it's going to make a significant jump in the rating itself.
Okay.
I would just add that prior, it was rated as a 13.2 when this role was filled in January. And I think the job description spoke to a much more clerical, level as an admin, if you will. And the candidate pool was not very strong. And I think that the position was filled with someone who necessarily wasn't a good fit. So in doing the classification, it's now come to a 15.2, which is 2 jumps in classification.
Okay.
And I think that it will open itself up to a much stronger candidate pool.
Yeah.
And to John's point, I don't think going back and adding the education at another 0.5, because I myself thought about that as we were going through the rating. It's not going to make a difference one way or the other in the classification. So it lands at a 15.2, which is on par with with Emily's position as a 15.2, which Emily is the planning department admin assistant. So she supports Martha. And when we look at it in comparison to the other interfacing roles with the public in terms of the assessor's clerk and the treasurer collector clerk, assistant treasurer collector, it lands one classification above that. And I think that to me makes sense because there is a little bit more interpretive or there's some areas of gray, I guess I would say. Does that make sense, Martha?
It does, yeah.
Okay, so I see it as being more interpretive in terms of how you proceed in many different scenarios, as opposed to an assessor's clerk or the assistant treasurer collector, where there's some very specific designed procedures that you follow when you're posting payments or taking abatement applications. So I think it sort of has landed where I would expect it to. And I guess I would just throw it back to Martha to see if she feels the same.
No, I think that makes sense. I mean, there's certainly going to be some amount of discretion here in terms of dealing with various different situations and things. So that makes sense to me.
Right. And that's as we talked about at the beginning, just as the end of the process sanity check we always go through to make sure that as you compare it and contrast it against other similar type roles in the town structure, it makes sense. It has a feel-good component to it that, it's slotted about where it should be. Usually that's the case, but every once in a while we need to take a long, hard second look here.
Yeah.
And Sean, you make a good point about education. My only concern about that, I know you said it won't affect the rating either way, but if we were to reconsider it, then we would need to change the job description to associate's degree required. And Martha, I think you said you're a little hesitant to do that.
It was in the entire pool too.
Yeah, so I think what we left it was, we would like to see some post-high school work towards, if not a degree, towards a certification or something along those lines, and at a 15.3, we're much more likely to get that.
15.2.
15.2, excuse me.
Yes.
15.2. So,
Yep.
So it sort of dovetails, nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
With that in mind, Martha, do you have any other thoughts or questions?
No, I don't. I just appreciate your process.
Try to be thorough and consistent, that's important. So great to see you again. Hope you're feeling better.
Thank you very much.
Back here soon. And if there are no other thoughts, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second,
Second.
any discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Martha, great to see you. Thank you again.
Good to see you. Thank you all.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.